Haifong. And making the headlines today, Special Committee on Foreign Job Scams established. Flood season, not the right time to hold GE15. Finance Minister Tengku Datuk Seri Zafrul Tengku Abdul Aziz has refuted the claims of some parties that the government had failed to manage the nation's economy, saying that the facts and figures are more than sufficient to reflect the real situation. Elaborating further on the matter, the minister said the country had recorded an encouraging gross domestic product (GDP) growth in the first half of 2022 and that the positive momentum is expected to continue in the second half of the year.
Ekonomi gagal tu tak ada basis kerana KDNK bertumbuh 8.9% pada suku kedua dan 5% pada suku pertama. Ini menunjukkan pertumbuhan 6.9%. Kadar pengangguran pun semakin menurun, 12 bulan berturut-turut. FDI naik dan sebagainya. All the list yang saya bagi tadi. Ini tidak menunjukkan ekonomi yang gagal.
Meanwhile, the Finance Minister said the MOF will continue to emphasize important structural reforms to strengthen the country's economic resilience for the future, aside from curbing the inflation rate amidst the uncertain economic environment. A multi-agency special committee led by the Foreign Ministry was formed to ensure Malaysians who have fallen victim to job scam syndicates and stranded in other countries are brought home safely. Minister in the Prime Minister's Department for Special Functions, Dr. Abdul Latif Ahmad, said the decision to establish the special committee was agreed upon at yesterday's cabinet meeting. Datuk Dr. Abdul Latif, through a statement released, said the issue was seriously discussed and the government is very concerned about the plight of Malaysians stranded in these countries and their worried families. He said the establishment of the special committee is evidence of the government's commitment to ensuring that the Malaysian victims are brought home safely. On Tuesday, Prime Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob said the government would ensure that Malaysians who have become victims of job scams in several countries be brought home safely, and efforts were being made through certain channels for this purpose. On Monday, a group of non-governmental organizations, NGOs, sent a memorandum to the Prime Minister seeking assistance as well as government interference to solve this issue. The minister advised Malaysians to contact the Foreign Ministry if they received any job offers from overseas to ensure the offers are legit so as not to get caught in fraud scams. Meanwhile, the Foreign Ministry in a statement last night said it will continue to step up efforts to rescue Malaysians who fell victim to job scam syndicates overseas so that they can be brought home safely. The ministry said that so far it had received reports on 301 such cases in Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar and Thailand. Of this number, 168 victims have been rescued and returned to the country. Apart from this, 34 victims are being held at Immigration Detention Depot and the remaining 99 are still being traced by the authorities of the countries concerned. An international student was arrested by the police in Seremban Negeri Sembilan last Monday on suspicion of possessing child pornographic materials. Royal Malaysia Police PDRM Secretary Datuk Nur Syah Muhammad Saaduddin, through a statement released today, said the arrest of the 24-year-old man was possible with the cooperation of the United States Federal Bureau of Investigation, or FBI. She said the police found the pornographic materials on the suspect's laptop and mobile phone. The man is found to use social media applications to communicate with the victims and then threaten them with sextortion. She added that he would be brought to the Seremban Magistrates Court today to be charged under Section 5 of the Sexual Offences Against Children Act 2017. It is not conducive to hold the 15th general election GE15 during the flood season as many factors need to be considered. Health Minister Khairi Jamaluddin said besides health considerations, the Health Ministry MOH is of the view that many factors including manpower and public safety must be taken into account.
3. Faktor kesihatan. Bila berlaku banjir, biasanya juga berlaku peningkatan dari segi penyakit berjangkit. Sebab bila berlakunya banjir, dalam keadaan ada air, waterborne disease ataupun penyakit-penyakit yang selalu menjangkiti melalui air akan meningkat, ya, macam-macam infectious disease. Itu memerlukan rawatan daripada pihak Kementerian Kesihatan. Itu tak termasuklah kecederaan dan juga demam dan sesama disebabkan cuaca. Jadi dari segi kesihatan, dari segi Kementerian Kesihatan, memanglah dari segi kesesuaian diadakan pilihan raya waktu musim banjir ini tak sesuai.
He added that a lot of manpower would be needed for the election, while many hands would be needed as well during the monsoon season to handle temporary evacuation centres to take care of people's safety and for evacuations. Asked whether the MOH had proposed dates it felt suitable for GE15 to be held, Khairi said the matter was discussed in general, but it was up to the Prime Minister to decide. Tenaga Nasional Berhad TNB is investing 21 billion ringgit in its Grid of the Future program from 2022 to 2024 to enhance its transmission and distribution network readiness and reliability. President and Chief Executive Officer Datuk Baharin Din, through a statement release, said on a regional level, TNB is proactively identifying transmission grid locations that will improve market integration and will work closely with local authorities. He also noted that all relevant parties must play their part in their shared journey towards a greener, more equitable and resilient future. He said ASEAN power utility companies need to accelerate collaborations towards achieving an interconnected ASEAN Power Grid APG in support of the region's collective goal of achieving net zero emissions as member countries shift to cleaner and more sustainable energy. Baharin stressed that an interconnected grid like the APG is crucial in helping ASEAN member countries leverage resources from their neighbours during times of crisis, as well as providing the opportunity to trade and leverage the pricing of resources at other times. As ASEAN's power utilities accelerate their transition to a sustainable future, the sharing of renewable energy sources will spur incremental inflow of private investments into ASEAN, as well as drive innovation and growth of clean energy in the region, he said. Citing the successful commencement of the Laos, Thailand, Malaysia and Singapore Power Integration Project, LTMS-PIP, this year, Baharin said he is confident that ASEAN power companies can work towards realising the APG. In our foreign segment, Russia-Ukraine exchange prisoners in surprise swap. Hungry men, women and children holding assorted pots and pans lined up to get rice doled of large cauldrons in a camp set up by a private NGO for people displaced by the recent floods in Pakistan. Hundreds of thousands of people displaced by the floods are living in the open as floodwaters spread over hundreds of kilometres may take 2 to 6 months to recede. The stagnant waters have led to not only serious health issues but also to rising hunger among the displaced people. The camp houses around 85 families. NGO workers said they were trying their best, but the number of flood refugees is becoming too big to manage. A historic and intense monsoon dumped about 3 times as much rain on Pakistan as the 3-decade average, which combined with glacial melt caused unprecedented flooding. The deluge has affected nearly 33 million people in the South Asian nation of 220 million, sweeping away homes, crops, bridges, roads and livestock in damages estimated at $30 billion. Officials are warning they now risk losing control of the spread of infections in a dire situation that World Health Organization WHO described as utterly heartbreaking. 10 prisoners of war from countries including the United States and Britain have been transferred to Saudi Arabia as part of an exchange between Russia and Ukraine. According to a Saudi official briefed on the operation, the group comprises 5 British nationals, 2 Americans and 1 each from Morocco, Sweden and Croatia. The Saudi statement said they had arrived in the kingdom from Russia and that Saudi authorities were facilitating procedures for their safe return to their respective countries. The releases came following efforts by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, Saudi Arabia's de facto ruler, in continuation of his commitment to the humanitarian initiatives towards the Russian-Ukrainian crisis. Video broadcast by the official Saudi press agency showed the 10 prisoners of war being greeted by Saudi officials as they descended from a plane in Riyadh, then being escorted into a room where they chatted with diplomats from their respective embassies. Prince Mohammed recently met with a special envoy of Ukraine's president, and during the meeting, he affirmed the kingdom's keenness and support for all international efforts aimed at resolving the crisis politically and its continuation of its efforts to contribute to alleviating the humanitarian effects resulting from it. At least 1,026 people were arrested in Russia Wednesday during nationwide protests against the partial mobilization of civilians to fight in Ukraine announced by President Vladimir Putin. An NGO, OVD Info, said demonstrations broke out in at least 38 Russian cities in the largest protests since those following Moscow's decision to send troops to Ukraine in February. AFP journalists in the center of the Russian capital said at least 50 people were detained by police wearing anti-riot gear on a main shopping street. In Russia's former imperial capital, St. Petersburg, AFP reporters saw police surrounded a small group of protesters and detained demonstrators one by one. Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said that Russia should initially mobilize some 300,000 reservists after Putin, in a televised address, warned Russia would use all available military means in Ukraine. Flights out of Russia were nearly fully booked this week. Airline and travel agent data showed Wednesday in an apparent exodus of people unwilling to join the conflict. Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis and malaria raised $14.25 billion at a donor conference led by US President Joe Biden as decades of progress against the diseases are set back by COVID. It was the highest amount ever pledged for a multilateral health organization, but fell far short of the ambitious goal of $18 billion after the United Kingdom and Italy said their announcement would come later. The Global Fund was created in 2002, bringing together governments, multilateral agencies, civil society groups and the private sector, with the funding cycles last 3 years.
Now is the moment to accelerate our efforts to reduce health inequities and to address barriers to access, including gender and human rights barriers, to build a more inclusive healthcare systems, to leave no one behind, to end AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria for good. Let's demonstrate our collective power to take on challenges that matter most in people's lives and deliver progress.
Among countries, the United States pledged the highest amount, $6 billion, followed by France with 1.6 billion euros, 1.3 billion euros by Germany, 1.08 billion US dollars by Japan, 1.21 billion Canadian dollars by Canada, and 715 million euros by the European Union. The Gates Foundation pledged $912 million. The $18 billion goal was based on getting back on track to end AIDS, TB and malaria by 2030, recovering ground lost during the COVID pandemic and saving 20 million lives over the next 3 years. The fund estimates it has reduced the death toll from AIDS, TB and malaria by 50%, saving more than 50 million lives over the past 2 decades. About 200 pilot whales have perished after being stranded on an exposed, surf-swept beach on the rugged west coast of Tasmania, Australia. The state's Wildlife Service Operations Manager said just 35 whales were still alive, with rescuers racing against the clock to save as many as they can. The reason for the stranding is unknown, but wildlife biologists and a vet have been sent to investigate. Authorities were trialling a new method to transport the whales that were still alive back to the sea. The location of the stranding is remote, about 30-minute walk from the nearest beachside car park. The event occurred a day after another mass stranding on King Island in Bass Strait, where 14 sperm whales died and washed ashore. Whale strandings are not uncommon in Tasmania, as experts say the island stays a hotspot for such events. A US astronaut and 2 Russian cosmonauts blasted off to the International Space Station ISS Wednesday on a Russian-operated flight in a rare instance of cooperation between Moscow and Washington. The Russian space agency Roscosmos and NASA both distributed live footage of the launch from Kazakhstan, and commentators speaking over the feed said it was stable and that the crew is feeling well. NASA's Frank Rubio and Russia's Sergei Prokopyev and Dmitry Petelin make up the crew that launched from the Russia-leased Baikonur Cosmodrome at 13:54 GMT. Rubio is the first US astronaut to travel to the ISS on a Russian Soyuz rocket since President Vladimir Putin sent troops into pro-Western Ukraine on 24th February. Russian cosmonauts and Western astronauts have sought to steer clear of the conflict that is raging back on Earth, especially when in orbit together. A collaboration among the United States, Canada, Japan, the European Space Agency and Russia, the ISS is split into 2 sections, the US orbital segment and the Russian orbital segment. At present, the ISS depends on a Russian propulsion system to maintain its orbit about 400 kilometers above sea level, with the US segment responsible for electricity and life support systems.
Arcing out to the northeast from the Baikonur.
Coming up in sports, Kings Cup to serve as preparation for AFFN Asian Cups. National diver Gabriel Gilbert proved he is well ahead of the pack as he retained the men's 3-meter springboard gold medal at the Malaysia Games Sukma in a dominating fashion yesterday. The 20-year-old Sabahan topped the competition with 390.30 points, a 36-point advantage over the nearest competitors, including 2 national teammates, to secure his 4th Sukma goal since his debut in Sarawak in 2016. Yesterday, the 2022 Birmingham Commonwealth Games silver medalist successfully defended the 3-meter springboard synchronized event title with Julfadli Jali, despite having paired up for the first time. The national diver conquered the podium as expected, as Sarawak's Bertrand Rodic clinched the silver with 353.95 points, while Hanis Nazirul Jayasuriya of the Federal Territories took the bronze with 348.60 points at the National Aquatic Centre in Bukit Jalil. Gabriel, however, felt that the level of competition in Sukma is getting more intense compared to a few years ago, as many divers attempting jumps with higher degree of difficulty. Meanwhile, Hanis Nazirul Jaya retained his 1-meter springboard title by scoring 325.05 points, while Sarawak's veteran and another Federal Territories athlete, Nur Qayyum Nazmi Muhammad Nazim, bagged the silver and bronze medals respectively.
Dive ke-3 dan ke-4 itulah yang saya rasa gap saya boleh emas untuk dapat emas, dan saya rasa dive ke-5 dan ke-6 tu saya buat yang mana yang saya mampu je. Dan sebab saya tahu Rodik punya dive difficulty lagi tinggi daripada saya, jadi saya buat lagi cantik daripada dia lah.
After the Sukma diving competition, both Gabriel and Hanis Nazirul are expected to compete in the International Swimming Federation FINA Diving Grand Prix at the same venue from 25th to 27th November. National Football Squad head coach Kim Pan-gon intends to use the Kings Cup tournament in Thailand as preparation for the upcoming ASEAN Football Federation AFF Cup and the 2023 Asian Cup. He said the four-nation tournament would provide the opportunity for his charges to gain experience and confidence to face regional rivals in both cup tournaments.
First time faced against Thailand. I want to maintain this good mood. We try our best. I think we try our best. For us, yeah, we want to keep maintain a good mood, and also tomorrow is more important thing is how we can maintain our good performance. Since last June, we had very good, and we want to maintain and also a little bit more further. We want to see maybe better performance than last June. That is our aim.
He also expressed confidence in the new players called up for the tournament and hoped that they would display their best performances to remain in the squad. The 2022 AFF Cup is scheduled from 20th December till 16th January next year, while the quadrennial Asian Cup will be held from 16th June till 16th July 2023. Melaka United FC will continue to persevere after being cut from the Malaysia Cup 2022 competition and ensure that the team can continue to compete in the country's football league next season. Melaka United said in a statement the club was still looking for ways to resolve all problems it currently faces and believes that it can weather this crisis if all parties came together to help ensure the welfare of players, coaches and team officials. It also said the shares restructuring and obtaining of funds from stakeholders have yet to be completed, and this has caused the club management to make a decision to resolve this matter first and prioritise keeping Melaka United in the Malaysia League next year. The statement read that the club also apologised to all players, coaches and officials who will miss out on the country's prestigious football competition, the Malaysia Cup, this season, along with its supporters and fans. The club had been pulled from the 2022 Malaysia Cup competition yesterday for failing to settle the deferred salaries of players and officials. The Malaysia Football League, MFL, issued a statement stating that its board of directors came to that decision as the club had failed to resolve the matter by the stipulated deadline. Stan Wawrinka has backed up his two qualifying wins at the Moselle Open in Metz by reaching the second round of the main draw at ATP 250 Indoor Hardcourt Tournament in northeastern France. The former world number 3 defeated João Sousa from Portugal 7-6, 6-2 on Wednesday. Wawrinka, who has struggled to find his best level since returning to tour in April after he had been sidelined from the courts for 13 months with a foot injury, saved all 3 break points he faced and capitalised on 2 of his own 3 break point chances to succeed in 1 hour and 34 minutes. Wawrinka also produced a high-class serving performance against Sousa. The 37-year-old Swiss will next take the tournament's top seed Daniil Medvedev of Russia. He will hope to find that rhythm again in his 4th ATP head-to-head meeting against top seed Medvedev. Wawrinka has won only one of the pair's previous meetings, but it was the most recent at the 2020 Australian Open. In the other match, Dominic Thiem is showing signs of a resurgence as he continues his comeback from a right wrist injury. The Austrian won a battle of former top 10 players against Richard Gasquet at the Moselle Open. Former world number 3 Thiem clawed past the former world number 7 6-3, 7-6 to reach the second round in Metz. A very slow start gave the French player an early 3-1 lead, but the Austrian completely stormed back into the match with a superb 5-0 run that saw him close out of the opening set 6-3. He took over from the baseline with Gasquet unable to stop him. The second set was far more competitive, but Gasquet was the player to get the first break in the second set once more. It came after Thiem squandered a break point and it left him very angry. He did compose himself in time to break back and make it 4-4. Thiem squandered a match point at 6-5 but eventually took over once more in the tiebreak, closing it out 7-3 to triumph after 1 hour and 47 minutes and set a second round showdown against second seed Hubert Hurkacz. Phoenix Suns owner Robert Sarver on Wednesday is seeking buyers for the team a week after being suspended for a year and fined $10 million by the National Basketball Association (NBA) following an investigation into allegations of workplace misconduct. An independent investigation found that Sarver, who bought the Suns and the WNBA's Phoenix Mercury in 2004, engaged in inequitable conduct toward female employees, including sex-related comments and inappropriate remarks on female employees' appearances. Sarver, who cooperated fully with the investigation process, was also found to have used a racial slur on at least 5 occasions when recounting the statements of others. He said he did not want to be a distraction to the teams and would focus on becoming a better person while supporting the community in meaningful ways. The NBA commissioned its investigation following an ESPN report in November 2021 that detailed allegations of racism and misogyny during Sarver's tenure. Sarver denied the allegations and said he welcomed an investigation. Sarver purchased the Suns in 2004 for $401 million. According to Forbes, the team was valued at $1.8 billion at the beginning of last season. And that concludes today's edition of Updates at Noon. In our top story, Special Committee on Foreign Job Scams established. Tune into News at 10 coming up at 10 p.m. on saluran Berita RTM on My Free Views channel 123. Or you can also stream the news by surfing RTM Click. Thank you for watching. I'm Renee Fong. Have a pleasant afternoon.